Hello, this is another episode of Kiva's Corner. This is Chuck Edson. I'm here with our mascot, Kiva Sugarman, a fellow who died in 1952, but was popular here and known mostly for his motto, "I ain't mad at nobody." And that's something we're trying to emulate here at Kiva's Corner. And by the way, we're also trying to adopt the name Kiva Circle to become a official 501c3 with the IRS. This is another of our continuing series of information and opinions, and trying to present some information here, and that will help us become better citizens, and we hope that we can do that by becoming better aware of ourselves and our natures and understanding one another, because I guess the only way we can really understand others is to understand ourselves. I'm of the opinion, and I think many are, that we've spent a lot of time being awfully angry at one another, and perhaps it's time to give each other a break from that, and also to hold each other accountable and be honest and courageous about stating our opinions and listening to other people's opinions too. I think it takes what I call an unusual kind of courage to sometimes stand up and make your statements and express your values in a way that is both sincere and not offensive. And and that's kind of going to be leading up to that in this episode. We're going to be talking about how people are conforming, and how we tend to perhaps obey authority in occasions when we probably should give it a second thought. This episode follows up on some of the points we raised in an earlier episode about how do we get better leaders, or how do we get such bad leaders, I forget, but was information in Brian Klass's book, Corruptible, How Do We Get Bad Leaders and What to Do About It, was the subtitle, something like that. He and many others point out that one of the essential causes of all this is human nature itself. We were brought up, in a sense, over 6-7 million years to evolve in very dangerous environments, and came to have sticks and stones to try to take on lions and mammoths over the millennium. And now, so we evolved for that environment, and here we are in a much different world where there's billions of us instead of 20 or 30 at a time, and we're living in populations of hundreds of millions and trying to cope with each other and our different cultures, and it's not easy. One of the principles that I believe is important to a free society and democracy is to oppose illegitimate authority, which the term authoritarian, I think, applies to that. Now, I don't mean to reject all authority. Authority that is legitimate and based on evidence and good information and humane intentions, I think, is what we need to try to become familiar with. And I think we can agree that none of us likes to be told what to do when we don't agree with it, and told to get along with it. So again, this is about social conformity and obedience to authority. I think to understand this, we need to put it into some historical context, and a lot of what I think about and deal with here has to do with human history and American history since World War II. Following World War II, many social scientists and a lot of people asked, how did this Holocaust happen? Naturally, I guess a lot of the people who wrote about this and did research it were Jewish people. After all, it was 6 million of those people who got killed in the Holocaust, so they had a they had a special motive, but among the kinds of works that weigh in here are Eric Fromm's book, Escape from Freedom, which we may discuss here later, and another one by Viktor Frankl that's is popular and well known, Man's Search for Meaning. But here we're going to look at one of the studies that is probably most pertinent and is commonly known as the Milgram experiment, and it really focuses on the obedience to authority question, or doing what we're told to do even when we don't want to. But I'm going to start with conformity first because, conformity and emotions actually are at the core of all this. We do what we finally decide emotionally, what it is we need to do for whatever reason. All of our judgments are driven by emotions and interests and survival and whatever else, interest about family or nation and stuff that going into it too. But we're going to begin with Solomon Asch, and another Jewish person who, before the Milgram experiment, did conformity experiments, and he began in 1955. And I don't know where he was working, but he recruited 123 male college students that we're going to call subjects in this discussion, like psychologists do in their experiments. And he paid them $4 to take part in an experiment on perception, he called it. And in 1955, $4 was a lot more money than it is today. In both experiments, we'll notice that the experimenters deceived the subjects, and in both cases, the people who came in that were the subjects or the tests of the experiment were they didn't know that they were dealing with actors. They thought they were dealing with legitimate people, and they were legitimate in a sense. But so in Asch's experiment, he would bring in a person and tell them that they were going to take part in an experiment with 6 or 8 other people, and it was a perception test. And the test was like the two slides we're showing here. One would show one line that was, like a certain length, and the other slide would show a card that would show 3 lines, A, B, and C. And their job was to say which line, A, B, or C, matches the one on the card. Well, and so they went through this 12 times, I think, for every subject there, every person who came in, test subject. And again, the other 6 or 8 were all actors. And the first 2 times through this thing, everybody would agree that it was slide B or slide C that was the same size as the first card.
3.
But on the third trial, something happens.
2.
2.
2. 2. 2.
The subject denies the evidence of his own eyes and yields to group influence.
1.
Asch found subjects went along with the group on 37% of the critical trials. But he found through interviews that they went along with the group for different reasons.
1.
1.
They must be right. There are 4 of them and 1 of me.
1.
This subject's yielding is based on a distortion of his judgment. He genuinely believes that the group is correct.
1.
1.
1. 2.
And this test has been done many times, replicated, as they say. But they've done it many times. They found that, kind of surprised me, women are more apt to conform than men, but my wife's not that case. But anyway, that in at least one version, they tried this experiment where everybody was of the same cultural group, or of the same, forget the words they use for it, the same kind of same kind of population. And in those settings, on the average, 37% of the people conformed all the time. So, in a way, the Ash's conformity study gave some numbers and percentages to what they expect to see. What they expected to see quite a few people would conform, and they did. The second study we're going to talk about, the Milgram experiment, was done in 1961 at Yale. And those of you who have know of the Stanford experiment, the prison experiment that we covered in another episode, it's compared to that one often. And both of these studies kind of demonstrate or show a dark side of humanity. 1961, again, looking at this historically, was Israel had been formed about 25 years ago. It was 25 or more years since World War the Nazis were in power. And the Israelis went over to South America, and I don't know, maybe Argentina cooperated, or maybe they just kidnapped Adolf Eichmann, who was a notorious commander of Auschwitz prison that I'm sure you've heard of, where hundreds of thousands of Jews were exterminated, definitely in a Holocaust. By the way, there have been a number of Holocausts before and after World War II that I'm not going to bother to name, but hopefully maybe we'll prevent one with this episode. But following World War II, there were the Nuremberg trials. You've probably heard of it. The Allies brought in 24 Nazi leaders, superior commanders and so forth, that were tried for, crimes against humanity or whatever the equivalent was, and most of them were hung, I believe, but many of them said, oh, gosh, I was just following orders, which was more or less the same kind of defense that Eichmann put forward 25 years ago. And his case was studied, including by pretty much in depth by a pretty famous philosopher, a conservative philosopher named Hannah Arendt. But she noted, she took a look at Eichmann and determined, well, he was about the most meek and mild mannered man you could find. There was an account where he ran over a cat with his car and just was traumatized by this experience. However, he didn't get his hands bloody. He just ran a prison and had people doing all the dirty work for him, gassing thousands of Jewish people a day and sending them off to other ways to die, and dying in prison camps and whatnot. But anyway, so Milgram, like many people today, still ask, how is it that so many people can be capable of obeying authority to the point of causing extreme pain and deprivation and even death to thousands, hundreds of thousands of, innocent people?
Are ordinary people able to do terrible things? And if so, how many would give a strong electric shock to an innocent other just because they are following an order? To answer these questions, we can look at the controversial work of a man who just wanted to find answers to his family's horrific past.
Again, like Ash's experiment, the subjects were, they were duped. They responded to an ad to take part in an experiment on memory and learning. And they came in and they'd report to an office, and there'd be another guy waiting there with them. And the Milgram would have these experimenters that were, distinguished-looking guys in white lab coats and stuff, and glasses that probably mistaken for professors or something, and doing the experiment. So the two guys would come into the room with the experimenter, and the experimenter would hold up two slips of paper and say, choose one, and they'd each choose one, and both of them, both the slips of paper said teacher, but the actor acted like that he got the learner answer. But so obviously our subject was the teacher. So after that, Milgram's experiment, they take the teacher and learner into the next room and strap the learner into an electric chair, and and there'd be a band on his wrist hooked up to something, and the experimenter explained to the teacher, well, when you press a button in the other room, you're going to deliver a shock, and gave the teacher a mild shock, a shock, kind of in the low middle range, so they have an idea of what it was like, and it was unpleasant and so forth. But so all in all, they brought in 40 people, 40 men off the street that took part in this experiment. And so what they had was, we got pictures here of the teacher sat down in front of this machine, and on the machine were a bunch of switches and a gauge and something a display on the above that said this is a very mild shock, and it went up by 15 degrees, 15 voltages all the way across from 15 volts to 450 volts. And there was a mic that they could talk into, that he could talk to the learner with, and a speaker so people could hear each other in both the rooms. And the teacher then would read off a list of words and other words to associate with it. And this big amplifier-looking device, imposing electronic machine, had voltages ranging from 15 to 450, and labels on there like we're showing you here on the slide, from slight shock to severe shock, and then they would read off these. They had trained them on words to associate together, like tree and apple, and that's not a good example, but you get the idea. And whatever, a street and sky or something, and maybe 10 of them, and then the task was that the teacher would read a word, and the student was to state the word that was associated with it. And when they were wrong, they would hit the shock switch, and they'd start at the bottom, and with each mistake, it would go up, increase the voltage.
In the beginning, the teacher would hear protest or bangs against the wall. If shocks would increase, the reactions would become louder, and in case someone would go all the way, the learner would fall silent. In case the teacher became hesitant and asked to stop, the experimenter would resort to the following 4 prompts. First, he would say, "Please continue." If that was unsuccessful, he would go on with, "The experiment requires that you continue." Then, "It is absolutely essential that you continue." And lastly, "You have no other choice. You must go on." Along the way, the volunteers displayed signs of extreme tension, such as sweating, trembling, and even uncontrollable laughing fits. The experiment would be stopped only after all 4 prompts had been used, or the maximum voltage of 450 volts had been given 3 times.
It turns out that almost 2/3 of these people were willing to ramp things up to the 450 volts. Only 23 stopped. 23%. Five of them stopped at 300 volts. As they kept going up the scale, more and more people finally said, "No, I'm done." But the results still came in as I reported, and not a good sign for humanity's ability to conform to authority to do things that we really do not want to do. So the conclusion, obviously, is that human beings are born to conform, and society make sure, that we do conform, if not with societal expectations. There's even a worse option for raising children, and that is, you don't defy me, but it's okay if you defy the teacher. A lot of kids are taught that, which is an unfortunate lesson to be given in life. And as a person who worked with criminals most of my career, that has a big part to do with the social behavior we have in society today. I'm going off script some of these comments, but I would like to end this on some comments about what I call, and hopefully others too call, unusual courage. And we see courage in the usual way as being willing to sign up for the draft and go off and kill people because our country says so. Maybe if more Germans had thought about what war they were going to, they may have come up with a different decision, but that would be very difficult. And it's almost like we're more willing to kill people and maybe be killed than to defy society's expectations. I'm going to try to finish up with even a more dramatic example of things. And as I was preparing this script, I was reminded of, I was a person who lucked out in the military draft. I won the lottery. I don't know how far I would have gone to resist, but I got lucky and I won one lottery in my life, and that's enough. But there was this infamous incident in Vietnam in 1968 where a platoon came into a village and they were looking for, revolutionaries, people fighting them, and didn't find anybody, but they became frustrated and started killing off civilians. I mean, they called them My Lai or My Lai massacre.
6 mẹ con tôi chui lại vào cái hầm tránh phố của gia đình. Mẹ tôi bảo các con chui vào trước, mẹ chui vào sau để mẹ cản đạn cho các con. Mẹ tôi chui vào khỏi miệng hầm thì lính Mỹ đánh lựu đạn xuống tứ tấp. Thân xác của mẹ, chị và các em tôi đã tan tành. Đứa em gái út của tôi đứt làm đôi. Thì lúc này là tôi bị thương và tôi nằm thiếp ở trong cái ngôi hầm này. Mãi đến 4 giờ chiều Mỹ rút đi. Cha tôi và các người trong làng còn sót lại về để lượm xác chết lên để chôn. Thấy tôi còn thở.
They killed 500 women and children primarily, and the way this ended was an American helicopter pilot was flying overhead, and he saw what was going on, and he landed his helicopter in front of the American troops and announced, "If you keep doing this, I'm going to blast you with the machine guns." And the people and our soldiers stopped. Lieutenant Calley was the commander of that platoon. I kind of wonder, you look at the guy and you wonder, did he really start this, or did somebody else in his platoon do it and he just kind of let it keep going? I kind of suspect the latter. None of these, out of the 30 or 40 American troops, there might have been 1 or 2 who were inclined to kill civilians, but they went along with what was going on. Lieutenant Calley got his picture here. You look at him, he's no mass murderer or anything. Look at the guy. Hugh Thompson, the pilot of the helicopter, a little more handsome, I guess, but I guess he kind of looks like a hero, but in this picture, he looks like a rather aggrieved individual, not like someone who is an American hero or something. And I would like to note that I believe all of those people living from that time suffered deeply for what they did, more than the helicopter pilot. It's a sad testimony about what happens in war. I would like to, there's a well-known, he's a real prolific YouTuber named Robert Sapolsky. He's an evolutionary psychologist at Stanford, written many books, most notably maybe Behave. But he has a saying which is, do the harder thing when it's the better thing to do. And that, I think that kind of captures the point of this. So thank you for listening to this episode. I appreciate it.